Hello, I'm Sonia Wood from Oikos. Today I'm going to share with you from our classic collection. We actually just call it our classic collection. It's this little collection here of books. Because of having home educated for so many years, and because read aloud was an important part of my own childhood, read aloud became very much a daily activity in our home when I was growing up and in the raising of our own children. And so I'm sure you can surmise from that that we've read hundreds of books and spent many, many hours in read aloud time. So it's very hard to know which books to offer you now because there's just such a vast selection. So what we did is we have chosen very specifically the books that we would like to share with you because they have a profound impact on the raising of children and they focus on character training. And as you may or may not know, we focus strongly on the training of children's character to equip them and make them ready to be able to serve the Lord in their adult lives. And so these little books I'm going to share with you today, each one of them is specifically supports that focus, and that is training of character. Let's start with the first one. This is Little Daisy and the Swearing Class. This little story is about a little girl whose parents died when she was very young, and she then was being raised in an ungodly home. But she never forgot those lessons that her parents taught her when she was very young. And one of them being, she never heard bad language come from her parents' mouths or the Lord's name being used in vain. And so this was planted in her. So again, it's an encouragement to you as a parent to remember that whatever you plant in your children's hearts that are good seeds, there is good going to come from them, because that's what the word says. Good will come out of the good that is stored up in the heart of a man. So, and if it's bad, well then bad will come out. So this little girl, Daisy, became a little flower seller, and she was quite horrified at the language that she heard on the street from the people. And she even corrected a gentleman one day about using the Lord's name in vain. Forget his name, General somebody, and he was an important man. And he was so amazed or convicted by this little girl correcting him in this manner that little did she know, or he know, that later on he was going to adopt her and she was going to be his very own. And so this little story is going to plant a seed and a message of the importance of speaking kindly and not using bad language. So if that's something you want to impart to your children, and you don't want to do it by just correcting them and disciplining and all the rest, you can read a little story, read aloud. I mean, we're really big on read aloud. You read this little story, and now you as a parent can reference back to, do you remember that story we read about little Daisy and why we shouldn't use bad language in our home and before the Lord and so on. So I hope you're going to enjoy that, and your children are going to get some good seeds planted in their heart after having read that. And now Roses and Thorns. This little story is another treasure because it's training character. And there's an auntie that sits in her rocking chair and tells her little niece and nephew when they come to visit stories. And I think it's Aunt Eleanor. I just want to check if I had it right, that it was Aunt Eleanor, and it is actually. So I went to look that up, and this is what I read in the first line on the book. In passing through thine earthly hours, avoid the thorns and choose the flowers. Here's a little illustration in the book of a vase of roses, and the thorns being taken out and left on the table. So we need to make sure that the thorns that we have, which we all have, don't scratch and hurt other people. And that's what the story is all about. Roses and Thorns, another little treasure. Our next one, The Little Medicine Carrier. This is a very sweet story, but actually very profound at the same time. It's about a little boy that works for a doctor, and he carries the bag of medicine, hence the little medicine carrier. But on his travels and journeys in doing this service for the doctor, he is met with many temptations, and he has to make a choice whether to fall in the temptation or avoid it. And I don't think I need to say any more. There is enough. If you've got a situation in your own home where you're finding temptation has been a bit of an appeal to any one of your children, then maybe you could read this little book to them, and now you can reference to this book and say, remember when we meet temptation, avoid it. The little medicine carrier story, and then you can use that as a reference, and once again it becomes a parenting tool. That's our little medicine carrier. And lastly, weed with an ill name. Before I go on to tell you about this particular story, I must mention that all of these titles that I'm sharing with you were actually written in the late 18th or early 19th century. And they're a collection from various different authors, and they were put into a category called character building. So this is just 4 of the titles from that. We possibly will add to them, but these are the 4 that have the most impact that we have discovered anyway. Not to be put off, please, by the fact that it's Old English. The way the stories are written is not modern English, and so it has a particular charm of its own. Some would prefer not to read a book with that old era, but we just feel it adds something of value to the book, because if they were written 100 or more years ago and the stories in them still are effective today, then it's worth reading. This one is a very real story about the fact that all of us have weeds in our lives, and we need to face it, and we need to pull the weeds out of our hearts. Otherwise, they're going to take over. We will discover that we will have fields of weeds very quickly. We don't want that, because they're going to choke the good and not allow the good to grow. And so this is quite a profound story. I'm sure you will agree that it's not only just for the children to learn a lesson. It's for anybody who reads this book is going to learn. And it's so nice when you use it as a read aloud, because now all of you are conscious and aware of little weeds that might spring up in one another's hearts, and you can quickly pluck them out before the roots go too deep. Weed with an ill name. That's what this one is all about. The title actually says it for itself. So there's our 4 little treasures from our character building series, and we're calling it the Classic Collection. And I really hope that you are going to have a lot of valuable time sitting reading to your children, reading aloud, taking the time to do it. Another thing I must mention before leaving you is to say they're short stories. You can see they're not very thick books, but wow, the value in them. They might not be long, but the value and the seeds that you can plant are really, really worth it. Well, they have been for us. So there you have them. Enjoy your read aloud time, and I'll thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.